welcome everybody here on behalf of Archaeology Scotland and the Stobs Camp project. But I'm not going to talk about all of that. I'm going to introduce you to Margaret Elliott, Deputy Lieutenant.
It is an honour for me to be here today to represent the Roxburgh, Eskdale and Lauderdale Lieutenancy, commemorating the young soldiers who died while prisoners of war at Stobs Camp. The Lord Lieutenant, His Grace the Duke of Buccleuch, very much regrets that he was unable to be here himself. My family has a long association with the Stobs estate, over 300 years, building 2 peel towers, subsequently destroyed by fire, and the present castle. In 1903, the Ministry of Defence bought it, and it has been a revelation to discover the story of Stobs since then, and how important it became during 2 world wars. The Stobs Camp project is a community-led project managed by Archaeology Scotland, focusing on the history of the camp and its people during the period of the First World War. This has also involved the Heritage Hub in Hawick, who has set up the first ever internment research centre, studying past and present internment throughout the British Empire. During the First World War, it was an internment camp for civilians and military prisoners of war, housing some 4,500 German Army and Navy personnel. Inevitably, there were deaths, and that is why we are here today, to remember young soldiers and sailors dying far from home. Of course, this huge camp had quite an effect on nearby Hawick, and the prisoners were useful with road maintenance, agricultural duties and forestry work. If the prisoners had an effect on Hawick, I wonder what effect Hawick had on them, and what memories they returned home with. There was obviously goodwill. A working party was sent to help fit a neighbour's fireplace, and noticed photographs of 3 serving of brothers, one of whom had been killed, and they sent their sincere regrets to the family. Too many men dying on both sides. My thanks to Diane Swift of Archaeology Scotland for her excellent brief, and I now have great pleasure in handing over to Colonel Jean-Bernard Lacroix of the German Embassy in London.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Mr. McAteer, ladies and gentlemen. We have come together at the Stobs Camp Memorial today, where on this particular date we commemorate the end of the First World War 100 years ago. All over the world there are military cemeteries and memorials like this. About 10 million people died in the First World War, the great catastrophe of the early 20th century. This figure alone defies our imagination, and that is why I believe it is so important for us to realize behind these numbers are the fates of human beings. This particular place, Stobs Camp, recalls 48 German soldiers and interned civilians who lost their lives here between 1915 and 1919 as a result of war events. The lives of sons, fathers, loved ones, torn from life by the upheavals of world politics. Surely all had hoped to come home safely, to embrace their loved ones in their arms and live a life in peace. And whatever they may have fought for their families, their country, or simply because they had to go to war without ever being asked whether they shared its goal or not, they are all united here. And for those who survived the battles on land, on water and in the air, a new world opened. About 4,500 men were also interned here, and for many of the survivors, the prisoner of war camp became, in time, a temporary home. And for some, it also became the place where they found love, and they remained after the end of the war in enemy country, a country which many had never really perceived and experienced as being enemy and hostile. Thus, the majority of the prisoners were considered under the circumstances as being integrated. They engaged in camp routine of work, training and cultural events, also outside the camp fences. They all in their way played their part in reconciliation, a reconciliation which, at least in Europe, still needed another great war to take lasting root. That I, as a representative of Germany, the then enemy, can stand here today and share with you this act of remembrance is testimony to this reconciliation beyond the grace. And I thank you personally for this opportunity to be here. Remembrance Day calls upon us, and in particular this year, to draw lessons from the horrors of history. At least on our continent, and I still consider the UK as being part of the European continent in a sense, this seems to have succeeded. For over 7 decades now, we have been living in peace. For most of us, war has become something remote, something that at most comes to us from TV or media. We owe this long period of peace especially to those who gave their lives for what they believed in, irrespective of nationality, class, or origin. We bow our heads before them in humility. Graves and memorials like these here are not just places of remembrance. They are above all places which give the dead a voice which reminds us what they went through and suffered. And this voice calls upon us, the living, to do everything in our power to ensure that our children never again suffer the fate they had to suffer. But they also remind us that it is vital to dedicate ourselves with the utmost resolve to achieving and preserving peace, a ceaseless struggle which today too requires that lives be put at risk, especially the lives of our soldiers today. This struggle gives meaning to the missions of our servicemen and women which they undertake for the international community in our countries. And for all these reasons, the care and preservation of these sites is so tremendously important. And I would like to thank at this point, quite especially, to the many volunteers who have looked after and cared for this memorial, who have basically re-erected it and cared for it over so many decades. This too is practicing humanity beyond all borders. Thank you once again.
This seems as good a day as any to talk about the common humanity that we all share, and it's lovely to have the experience of sharing with folk from other countries today. And at the tail end of the Great War, of course, we were reminded of our common humanity by the fact that not only did 10 million die during the Great War, but 12 million succumbed to the influenza that followed in its immediate aftermath, reminding us again of our humanity. I was welcomed to Hawick about 10 years ago. Hawick is the most welcoming town I've experienced. I'd like to think that the POWs and the internees were similarly welcome, but I hesitate to say that. I think they were largely tolerated, and in some cases they built up bonds which were probably quite friendly and warm. But I can't imagine what German folk who'd never left their country made of this place. It's lovely in the summer, actually, yeah, I know. I mean, as Hawick folk love this, the landscape, the surroundings. It means so much to folk here. But imagine yourself as either a civilian or a German soldier, and the POW experience is not something we typically spend much time thinking about, certainly not in the First War. And to be so emasculated, so disempowered, so stolen of purpose in your daily life, to be simply existing. Food, sleep, and whatever else of a meaning to your life you can make for yourself in these surroundings. I can't begin to imagine how doleful, depressing the barbed wire fever or the enfeeblement of mind that German people were exposed to living here at Stobs must have been truly awful. There's a word in the back there actually. I'll come to it in a moment. Because Hoyk folk can understand this quite well, I think. When you're away from home, you like to capture something of the society or the community or the people you've left behind or the landscape. You know, burn societies are all over the world, all this kind of stuff. And I think in the camp here at Stobs, the Germans, like their colleagues in other internment situations or British soldiers in Germany or wherever, did their best to try and manufacture their community and create culture and make a life for themselves that somehow captured something of Heimat. That's what they're talking about at the back here, Heimat. We translate it cheaply as the word home, but it's not just home. It's about culture, it's about landscape, it's about all the place that's magical to you, it's all the stuff that means so much to you. Heimat is what they try to recreate in this godforsaken landscape. And did their best to do that, but sadly some of them didn't survive and didn't get home to Heimat. And that's recorded there in the back there. Words, depending on which ones you use, can lose their meaning. When you talk about peace, in typical terms we talk today about peace, but of course it wasn't a peace in 11th of November, it was a ceasefire. It's not the same thing at all, it's a truce. They just agreed to stop firing at each other. And we all know surely that peace is a lot more than that. It's not just the absence of firing. There's a Hebrew word, shalom, which to a Hebrew means everything is right, everything is the way it should be. There is justice, there is harmony, there is peace which goes way beyond just the absence of conflict. And what they got on the 11th of November 1918 was peace, but it wasn't shalom. And of course, within a year they had signed off on what they thought was a peace. And of course 20 years later it was anything but. And it's the distinction here. What we have here is, you see, war destroys, doesn't it? It just destroys. It's a kind of one-trick pony. Wars just knock things down. They just... the army, with all its best intentions, is a blunt instrument. You know, they're not peacemakers. They can't create peace where it's not already there. They can perhaps defend peace, but don't expect them to go in there and build a great community. We've discovered that to our cost in recent years. Armies are a blunt instrument, and war is the ultimate in destruction. That's why making peace is a creation. You build peace. You don't just rejoice in the fact that no one's shooting each other anymore. You actually have to go out and make a peace. You have to make reconciliation. You have to build relationships, make friendships, re-establish communication. You have to talk to folk, and they didn't do that in 1918-19, but you have to build a proper peace, and it's a fragile structure. It can collapse at any time. It's always got weak spots, but it's a construct. And I congratulate the folk who have done this so much, because there's a testimony to the fact that peace is built. It's a construction. It says that this is about building relationships again with people who are friends now, and hopefully will always be friends. But they only remain friends because you make the effort. It's like a marriage. You make the effort, you know. You put in the hours because relationships matter to you. So this structure represents a lot. I know in simple terms it's a reminder of the fact of the poor souls who never made it back home to their Heimat, but maybe they're in Heimat now. But, you know, I'm grateful to what the folk here in our Archaeological Society have done. I think it's a wonderful testimony. I know it's maybe for some folk it's just like an unusual day to have this, but actually it's really quite the right day, isn't it? You know, we're 100 years on. Let's draw a line under this and let's make something as they have done, and celebrate and rejoice that fact. So, on your behalf, I'll just say a wee short prayer of blessing. Oh Lord God, we thank you for this place. A reminder there's only stones and grass and rubble by and large, the remains of destruction and indifference. But out of those have been rebuilt something which is a reminder to us the fact that we can't let these things lie. Peace, as in shalom, requires work and effort, requires constant maintenance, care, empathy, humility. And we thank you for the work that's gone in to recover these stones and to rebuild this monument, to commemorate the lives of those who were lost, the lives of so many nations that were lost in the midst of this terrible war, the innocence lost of a whole world when it saw what it could do to itself. So we bless this stone as a commemoration, not just to the past, but as a signifier to the future too, for all peoples from Hawick, beyond and further afield. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, short silence now.
Eduard Wilhelm Klein, Peter Soltis, Karl Klein, Julius Johann Sikorski, Harry Miller, Paul Zalewski, Karl Nikolaus Persson, Friedrich Wilhelm Bauschulze, Helmut Piel, Robert Biermann, Hubert Kertscher, Frank Parker, Dr. Walter Gellhorn, Peter Wirth, Karl Schottler, Hermann von den Steinen, Peter Althausen, Karl Gese, Albert Schmielorz, Willi Robert Otto, Martin Winchol, Paul Heinrich Max Becker, Bernhard Theodor Herbst, Friedrich August Henning, Heinrich Kreuzer, Fritz Karl Kronberg, Wilhelm Hirschberger, Heinrich Karlage, Paul Karzin, Rudolf Laser, August Hansen, Wilhelm Peters, Hermann Thulen, Max Willi Neubert, Felix Grimm, Max Karl Dade, Gustav Rieple, Bruno Wagener, Emil Schilling, Gerhard Kloos, Julius Waldvogel, Bernhard Hadow, Heinrich Merkel, Sebastian Bichler, Karl Friedrich Wilhelm Erfurt, Hermann Kästen.
We've just heard the names of the 46 Germans that were interred in this cemetery. Since August, we've been working at this monument, been aware of the names, but have never been able to put a face to any of those names. A few days ago, I came across a memorial card to Sebastian Bichler, which we have here today, so at least we can put a face to one of the many men that never experienced Heimat again.
The Truth by Grace Brisbane. On the field among broken bones lie shattered lives and shattered homes, families never the same again from fallen men and broken hearts, happy memories of husbands and sons shot away by the trigger of guns. The lives it destroys, the dreams that it crushes, everything taken with the blood that gushes. Children and women stuck alone, waiting for them to hopefully come home, crying their hearts out all day and night, thinking that they may not make the fight. So if you thought that the war was so great, there lies the truth, the light amongst hate.
I hope that you will agree with me that this has been a most appropriate and moving commemoration of some terrible events, but with some wondrous outcomes. We are all very proud of what has happened here in the reconstruction of this wonderful monument, and we hope that for many generations people will remember what happened, and that we should be making friends, and that we should be seeking Heimat.